Someone is standing with a gun pointed at them, surrounded by people who believe they have complete control. But instead of begging for their life, they make a promise. Everyone in that room could die. And in Lioness, a line like that is rarely just a threat. Episode 3 exposed a breach inside Joe's operation, and now Episode 4 appears ready to reveal just how deep that betrayal goes. The real question is not simply who is hunting Joe. It is whether Joe has already walked into a trap designed specifically for her. The biggest danger in Lioness Season 3 is no longer an enemy that Joe can clearly see. It is uncertainty. After everything that happened in Episode 3, Joe knows that something has gone seriously wrong inside the operation. There is a breach, and that means somebody has managed to get close enough to the system to understand how it works. That changes the entire mission because Joe can no longer assume that the people around her are simply teammates. Every name, every movement, every piece of information suddenly has to be questioned. That is exactly where Episode 4 appears to begin. The official preview places Joe at the center of a hunt for a hidden network operating through covert handlers. That detail matters because this is not necessarily a normal organization with one obvious leader sitting at the top. A network built through handlers can be much harder to destroy. One person can disappear, another can take their place. One operation can be exposed while the larger structure remains hidden. And that creates a completely different problem for Joe. She is not simply trying to catch someone. She is trying to understand a system that may have been designed to stay invisible. Think about what Episode 3 already established. Joe was dealing with the possibility that someone had infiltrated her operation. Now Episode 4 pushes that idea even further by introducing a hidden network. If those two things are connected, then the breach may not have been an isolated incident at all. It could be one part of a much larger operation. That would explain why Joe's situation feels increasingly dangerous. When you know there is an enemy outside, you can prepare for them. When you know there is an enemy inside, preparation becomes much harder. The person helping you might also be the person feeding information to someone else. And Joe cannot afford to make the wrong call, because every decision she makes affects people in the field. Caitlyn and Westfield are also working against the clock, trying to understand the threat while Joe's team is already moving directly toward it. They have information, but they do not have the complete picture. And in an intelligence operation, incomplete information can be almost as dangerous as having no information at all. The pressure becomes even greater because Joe's personal life has never been completely separate from her work. She has spent the series trying to protect her family while repeatedly putting herself in situations where that protection becomes harder and harder to maintain. The more dangerous her operation becomes, the more difficult it is to keep that danger away from home. That is why the hidden network could be more dangerous than a conventional enemy. It does not have to attack Joe directly. It only has to understand how Joe thinks. If someone knows how she responds to threats, who she trusts, how she protects her team, and what she would do to protect the people she loves, they could manipulate her without ever standing in front of her. And then, we reach the scene that makes this preview so interesting. Someone is facing men with weapons pointed at them. There is almost no time left. Yet instead of begging, this person looks at them and promises that they will kill them all. We need to be careful here because the preview does not establish every detail about who is speaking or exactly how the scene unfolds. It could involve Joe. It could involve another major character. It could even be someone connected to the hidden network. But whoever says it is clearly not behaving like someone who believes they have already lost. That is what makes the moment so powerful. If it is Joe, the line could represent the kind of confidence we have seen from her throughout the series. She has survived situations that looked impossible before, and she understands that being surrounded does not necessarily mean the fight is over. But if it is another character, the meaning could be even more interesting. What if Joe has finally cornered someone who knows far more than she does? What if that person is not afraid because they know something Joe has not discovered yet? What if the threat is not simply coming from outside the operation, but from someone who has been moving pieces behind the scenes? That is where Episode 4 could turn the entire story upside down. Because the moment Joe realizes she is not hunting one enemy, but an entire network, the rules change. And if she discovers that someone close to her has been connected to that network, then the hunt becomes personal. The question is no longer just who is behind the operation, the question becomes, how long have they been watching Joe? One of the most important details in this preview is the phrase, hidden network. It sounds simple, but it could tell us a lot about the direction of the season. A hidden network does not need to expose itself. That is its entire advantage. The people involved can operate through different layers, different handlers, and different identities. If one person is discovered, the rest of the operation can potentially disappear before investigators understand how everything connects. And that is exactly the kind of enemy that could challenge Joe. Joe is extremely effective when she can identify the target, understand the threat, and move quickly. But a network designed to stay hidden attacks that strength. It gives her pieces without giving her the complete picture. One piece might lead to another person. That person might lead to a handler. The handler might disappear before Joe can reach them. And suddenly, Joe is left wondering whether the information she received was genuine in the first place. There is another hidden detail that makes this even more interesting. Episode 3 already established that the danger may be coming from inside. So the story appears to be moving from a simple question of who is attacking us toward the much more dangerous question of who inside our own system can we trust. That difference is enormous. If Joe's team discovers an outside enemy, they can unite against it. But if they believe there is a traitor among them, every conversation becomes suspicious. Every mission becomes more dangerous. Even an innocent mistake could look like deliberate sabotage. And that could create a powerful psychological conflict for Joe. Imagine knowing that someone on your team might be compromised but having no proof. Do you confront them and risk destroying an innocent person's loyalty? Or do you keep watching them while secretly wondering whether they are feeding information to the enemy? Either choice could be dangerous. Caitlyn and Westfield also become extremely important because they are trying to understand the larger threat while Joe is operating in the field. Their decisions could determine whether Joe receives the right information at the right time. And there is another reason the warning scene matters. If the person surrounded by armed men is connected to Joe's investigation, then the scene may not simply be about survival. It could be about information. The enemy may believe they have captured someone who knows something important, but that person may know something the enemy desperately wants to keep hidden. So when they say, essentially, you are going to regret this, it may not be empty confidence. It could be a warning that the people holding the weapons have made a catastrophic mistake. That is why I would pay very close attention to who is standing in the room, who is holding the weapons, and what information that person possesses. Because the identity of the person making that threat could tell us more about the entire season than the threat itself. The most interesting theory for Episode 4 is that the hidden network and the breach from Episode 3 are directly connected. This is not confirmed, but the setup makes the possibility difficult to ignore. If someone inside Joe's operation has been passing information to an outside network, then the enemy may already understand far more about Joe's team than they should. They could know where people are moving, which identities are connected, and potentially how Joe responds when someone she cares about is threatened. That could explain why the enemy feels so confident. But there is another possibility. What if there is not just one traitor? What if Joe is dealing with a structure where multiple people are connected without even knowing the full operation? In that situation, catching one person would not solve the problem. Joe could remove one link and still be surrounded by others. That would make the title and preview much more significant because Joe would be hunting something she cannot simply arrest. And I think this could also explain why the show keeps emphasizing time. Joe is running out of time. Caitlyn and Westfield are running out of time. The network is running out of time to remain hidden. When several characters are facing separate deadlines, it usually means those deadlines are eventually going to collide. My strongest prediction is that Episode 4 could end with Joe discovering that the person she believed was the target is actually only one layer of the operation. She may think she has finally found the person responsible, only to discover that someone else is giving the orders. And if that happens, the warning scene could suddenly make much more sense. Imagine Joe or another Lioness operative being captured. The enemy thinks they have control. They raise their weapons. They expect fear. Instead, the person looks directly at them and delivers the warning. Why? Because they know what is coming. Maybe Joe has already arranged a counter-operation. Maybe someone else is tracking the location. Or maybe the captive knows that killing them would expose the network's existence to people who are already closing in. Again, none of this is confirmed. But it fits the kind of pressure the season has been building. There is also a darker possibility. What if the enemy actually wants Joe to find part of the network? That sounds strange, but it could be a trap. Give an investigator a believable lead, allow them to follow it, and then control where they end up. If Joe has been moving exactly where the enemy expected, then the apparent hunt could actually be working in the opposite direction. Joe believes she is closing in. The enemy may believe Joe is walking deeper into the trap. And that would make the final warning even more interesting because perhaps the person making it knows that the balance is about to shift. So, what should we expect from episode 4? The first major development should be Joe pushing harder into the hidden network. She cannot simply stop after discovering a breach. She needs to know where the information is coming from and who is benefiting from it. But the deeper she goes, the more dangerous it becomes. The biggest mistake Joe could make is assuming that the first person she catches is the person controlling everything. If this really is a layered network, then the first target may only be an entry point. Caitlyn and Westfield could also be forced into difficult decisions. Their job is to understand the threat before Joe's team gets trapped, but intelligence rarely arrives quickly enough when people are already moving, and that creates a terrifying scenario. Joe could receive information that tells her to move forward at exactly the moment she should stop. Or she could be warned about a threat that is deliberately designed to pull her away from something even more important. The family angle could also become more dangerous. Joe has always tried to keep her professional world and personal world separate, but the series has repeatedly shown that this separation is fragile. If the people behind the network understand Joe personally, then her family becomes another possible pressure point. They would not necessarily need to attack her family directly. Even a threat against someone she loves could force Joe into making an emotional decision. And that is exactly what an intelligent enemy would want. The episode's most explosive moment may therefore not be the gunfight itself. It could be what we learn immediately afterward. Who was captured? Who ordered the attack? Who knew the location? And most importantly, who inside the system knew it was coming? If episode 4 answers even one of those questions, the entire season could shift. But I would not expect every mystery to be solved yet. A show like Lioness can gain more tension by answering one question while creating 3 bigger ones. That is why the warning scene could be the perfect cliffhanger. Imagine the episode reaches its final